everybody. It is Mike Levin on Sunday, March 14th, 2021. And I am on my way to pick up some delicious sushi dinner for the crew. And I am so looking forward to spring here in the Poconos. It is gorgeous. I didn't muster up the courage to go skiing and to have the sometimes anxiety-filled experience of a new going skiing for the first time with my family over what's going on this year. But I figure if we're going to be in this vicinity next year, definitely we're going skiing at my childhood Shawnee Mountain, where I used to go skiing growing up. And boy, how life goes down different directions. My dad headed up a ski club and brought me into the skiing clan, I guess, at some point. And I hated it. I hated the crowds. I hated the cold. I hated the long drives to get places and the frantic one-day trips. It was not my vibe. However, I had a friend from high school whose vibe it very much was. In fact, to the point where he started a business waxing skis after school and became one of the Forbes richest people in America. He made the short list there for a few years at the peak of the, I guess, second wave, not the dot-com boom, but as it made its second way around the survivors, and it became GSI Commerce and was eventually sold to AOL. And yeah, meanwhile, I gave up skiing, started restoring a Mustang convertible in 1971, the last of the great gas guzzlers before the oil embargoes that shrank all the cars. Boy, am I giving a background of me? Yeah, so I was 16 years old. I was 15 when I bought the car, and I spent that summer refurbishing it. I wouldn't say restoring it, but I became a pretty good Bondo molder. I didn't really do plexiglass. I was ready to, but I didn't need to. Bondo let me get the body shape back into really nice shape, and then I had it painted metallic blue, and that was my, high school me, this weird geek kid driving around in a big Mustang convertible muscle car. And I still look back on that very fondly, and I guess it started some of my connections to hardware, because not long before that, I was on the Coleco Atom computer, a computer that came from a company that could have been Nintendo. It was Coleco. They made the ColecoVision, and they made some of the arcade games. It was tied in with Nintendo. It was, the Donkey Kong games were really big on Coleco, and then subsequently on the Atom computer, which took those Coleco cartridges, so you could plug Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. into the top and play the home video games from the console in those days that was so popular. This was after the industry was basically created by Atari and the 2600, the VCS. And those engineers went on to make my favorite technology, the Amiga computer. And it was such an expression of what was possible during the day when everyone was coveting these Sun Spark workstations and things like it that let you do this high-end 3D graphics that was starting to get into the movies. And then suddenly the Amiga computer comes along that lets you do all this stuff almost as cool as those supercomputers. It really gave you that supercomputer feeling. You could really believe you were on a Sun workstation, especially when things like Lightwave 3D came along, the 3D software that came with the video toaster, and when the video toaster came along. And, the stuff that exists to this day is the software. Lightwave 3D, I'm sure, is still a thing. And it just goes to show how, over the long haul, the actual particular instances of hardware platforms is unimportant, because as hardware in general improves and software improves, software methodology and techniques and containerization and virtualization, you'll always be able to instantiate a close enough copy of that old hardware. You know, you'll put it on the right form factor device with the right buttons and it'll play like the old consoles or whatever. So don't get too attached to hardware. I know some people do their hardware museums. I even got rid of my original Amiga 1000 computer, except for the top, the case, the lid that was signed by everyone. If there was anything special in the metal anymore, it was in the plastic of that case because of the signatures that were etched in. And I have it for like display on the wall, and I kept the important piece that was best. And people might have said, oh, the motherboard, the chips, the silicon, that's where it all was. Well, yeah, but am I gonna get it running again in my lifetime? Unless I'm hardcore retro and make that my hobby. And some people do. And my daughter's getting on my case to do enough retro computing to get The Sims 1, 2, and 3 running. And I'm gonna look at that. I'm gonna get that happening. But the problem is modern software doesn't support the old software installs. So you have to get something, you know, maybe a virtual machine is the way to do it. And I get her on VMs. Make my kid a virtual box user. That would probably be the most likely direction to go, because as much as I hate those flaky soap bubble desktop VMs a la VMware, Fusion, that was actually pretty good. Fusion on the Mac was one of my favorites because of the way it integrated with virtual desktops, which everyone who watches my videos knows how much I'm in love with virtual desktops as a primary method of interacting with computers, because you get so much for so little screen space. And that means you carry around just that laptop screen there in front of you that you're using, that you're looking at. You don't have to turn your head much, you don't have to reorient yourself, and you get rid of moving your hand for a mouse out of the picture, and you keep your hand close, maybe on the touchpad. But even getting the touchpad out of your habits as much as possible, except for maybe the 3-finger swoosh to go left and right on your virtual screens. And when you could do that 3-finger swoosh to go left and right on your virtual screens, and one of them was Windows XP, I guess, in those days, running really well on the desktop of a circa 2011 MacBook Air, you really realized how cool that technology was and how much it could be a stable, reliable thing you could count on. However, they tended to poof. Virtual machines on desktops tend to poof. And I think there's this whole thing about type 1 virtualization, type 2 virtualization. Well, you don't want things crashing. You want things to be treated just as important as the original operating system that booted the computer in the first place. And so I have shied away from all those solutions, except maybe for Levinix, my distribution of Linux, which is exactly that, and not much more than that, a little virtual Linux that pops up in one of those little black box virtual machine consoles. Text only. I don't get QEMU's graphics subsystems working, even though a lot of it is there in that Levinix distro that I do, that little 20 meg distro that inflates to about 60 megs when it's done. You get enough Python and Vim and terminal software to log in and connect and get that type-in interface experience. And then you just watch it poof like a soap bubble, and there's never any problem with that, and never any fear of that. That's the way Levinix is supposed to be used. It loses all state when it powers off. And if you don't deliberately create these zip files that get loaded back up, it's an interesting way tiny core Linux maintains state by recovering zipped things in memory as you reboot that are applied almost like patches to a otherwise RAM-based operating system that loads a lot like FS init for people who know the old Linux init.d loading boot sequence. There's this RAM FS, and it's a small version of the operating system that's just loaded into RAM. Everything it uses is out of RAM. Stuff it would normally access off the hard drive is copied over, and it doesn't take much because it's very minimal, and its job then is to hand it over to a more disk-based operating system, something larger with a desktop like your Ubuntu desktop, for example. However, you don't have to, and I guess I'm rambling all over the place here. I was talking about the virtual machines. Yeah, well, we're in a virtual machine world now where it has stabilized and formalized because Microsoft is making it really, really easy now to get the Linux subsystem running. I don't run the insider track anymore, neither the fast nor the slow ring, because I like some stability. And even then, even that kind of conservatism in my Windows desktop, I'm still getting this strange new behavior in clicking the start menu. When you click the start menu, it takes 2 or 3 clicks sometimes just to get the start menu to appear. And it's like a lower sensitivity, or what used to take just a single click takes now a double click or a double time sensitive click, like the old Macintosh days. And I've tried removing service packs and software updates, and nothing seems to change it. It's like something in the hardware has changed. So, you know, I think this is my first really weirdness with Windows in quite some time, because Windows itself, ever since maybe 10, has stabilized to this highly reliable thing where it almost has the same state, except for the proprietariness and money-making nature of the software, but the same kind of personality almost as Linux desktops in my mind. And Ubuntu desktop really isn't that much better than Windows 10 in my experience, and I've used it for years, along with KDE, kicking the tires of Plasma, and I've tried a number of desktops over the years, including just being on a Mac and being on an Amiga computer. So I know some variations of desktop, and you know, nothing's really that exciting. Windows are Windows, and I don't like Windows. I like full screen. So flipping left and right on these full screen virtual desktops is really a pleasure, and is bringing back a lot of the love for computing that I think I lost when the Amiga went away. And I really had to mainstream myself, you know, for, you know, being valuable in the marketplace reasons. You want to use the equipment that everyone uses and that is available. So that equipment is typically Windows. Sometimes it's Mac, and I've been a Mac and an Apple person on and off through the years, but more off than on recently, getting my Apple product down to mostly just the iPhone, which I really do enjoy, because I have the Note 8. I'm in love with the Note 8. Its stylus experience is mwah. And I shall be working the Note 8's capabilities into my online presence a little bit as it gets underway here, because I like making my YouTube thumbnails. And the Note 8's Wacom quality stylus is perfect for spicing up my YouTube thumbnails, which I now think I'm gonna do. So I guess I wrap up here. My last video was like an hour-long talk to get to the fact that I want to talk about named tuples, all one word, all lowercase. Raymond Hediger. I remember watching him say, hey, this was mine, as he did one of these live demos using his Emacs. He's one of the Emacs wizards of the Python world. There are different types of wizards, and if you consider me one, I'm a spare tire wizard. I'm not really a full-time programmer. I'm not hired to create software. I happen to program in the course of my day job. And so I keep tools in the back of my car, just as you would carry a spare tire around. You never want to be caught without capabilities. And the capabilities I keep are Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, Jupyter notebooks more and more, Jupyter Labs in particular, because REPL in the browser is cool, and notebooks and documentation and integrating PyPy release with that under NBDev, all very cool. Treating almost everything as if it's a command line tool that supports parameters. Those parameters are always recorded and pickled, so when you run it in Jupyter Labs, you can run it like it was last run from the command line. Now you have some concept of communication between two execution environments. You're talking pickle to the hard drive as your message queue. So we'll get to 0MQ at some point soon, because I love the way Jupyter works, and the magic behind it needs to live in some projects I work on. I don't do much web development. I don't like programming genies that go, poof, what do you need? And have to be able to handle all the variety of user input that might come in. I am more like room service, where I'm like, here, you ordered this by this time, here it is, there's your order. I hope it's to your liking. I'll take your feedback, and next time it'll be even better. So I tweak deliverables. There's this continuous improvement cycle that I really encourage. I keep all my work in a notebook in its parallel set of .py files, which become the package. Sometimes goes into PyPy, and you can pip install it as well as git clone it. If you want to modify the code, you got to git clone it. I think the video coming up is going to tell about how to go down into site packages, especially with virtual environments, VENVs. VENVs becoming much easier now under Python 3. It's always there as VENV. You can slam out a quick one, and then just delete it when you're done. I like that pattern, like that behavior. That way you only need to remember the syntax to create a new VENV, which is like VENV, I have a name or something, the name, and then it gets created there. And you activate it, source, and then activate is loaded from inside of it. So all you have to do is remember enough Linux. See, this is where you start to need to know your Linux, even just to activate virtual environments under Python, because /bin/activate, what? There's a bin directory. So you need to start to get familiar with common traditional patterns. They don't exist for much more reason than that's the way the people who invented Unix decided it should be. And now these decisions are trickling forward in time because Linux won, and Linux is patterned on Unix. So you need to learn about your /bins and your /local/bins, which is different. One's system, one's user local bin, right? User local sbin, one of my favorite locations. It's not ideal. These are not perfect solutions. Python isn't a perfect language. Linux isn't a perfect operating system. But everything is good enough. And through a combination of muscle memory and tradition and practice and refinement of old gems into even better current renditions, still being living platforms, not some snapshot in time. Innovations will trickle over to the Linux world from, say, the Apple world, and how they copied their system daemon management stuff, and that became System D, which I'll be showing eventually, because there's like a payoff here where your Jupyter notebooks twinkle alive as scheduled events on some Linux headless server sitting somewhere. And all you have to do is log in enough to check the schedule. You don't even have to log in. You could have it git pull automatically. You could use a local repo, check your schedule, whatever, git commit, git push it, and then an auto polling and triggered events, git deployment stuff will just make sure that it's, updated on your server or whatever. So your server that is not necessarily running like a web server. Not everything is web. So that's one of the things you'll learn from me. There's vibes to coding styles and everything. Python, yes, I'm very much copacetic with a Python vibe. Concurrency, okay. Object-oriented, well, let me show you named tuples, right? My last video was an hour video to get to the thought, and this will wrap it up because I need to get my sushi. That not everything is what you think it is. When you're programming in a .py file, you're doing object-oriented programming because that is a package or a module that has, if you say x equals 1, you just created a property of that module. So you could import that py file and use that py file's name .x and you get 1 out. So you're doing it already object-oriented. You just don't know it. Guido just hid it around you in this delightful way. And I like that, but sometimes you need that advantage one level down. And on my last project, I actually used it, but I don't like it in Jupyter Labs. I don't like using classes or functions until you need them in Jupyter, because keep it REPL, pure REPL. A delight to run things a block at a time and break things out into functions when you really need to. And if you put the whole thing in a class, it's time to promote it. It's no longer a Jupyter Labs sort of thing. It's a module you import and you don't touch the code anymore. So you throw it off in a module, and other stuff, the living stuff, is where it's not in a class or some other sub-level function of bundling up your code. It's bundled up in that .py file. That's a bundle. That's a class. That's everything you do inside is a method of the class, or property or attribute. So you get OO for free just by using Python, and that's awesome. However, when you do need to bundle things up that next level down and have them very well organized and very well named, the magic fairy dust you want to sprinkle in is from collections import named tuple. So it's plural collections, from collections import named tuple as one word, all lowercase, namedtuple. And that sets the stage for some crazy stuff that I never thought I'd be teaching you how to do, which is to create new instances, new data type, to create new, here's a factory class. A named tuple is a factory class. You use factory classes to create new instances of that class. In this case will be a data type. I'm going to be teaching you how to make a new data type. A new data type that has the properties you desire, which is basically labeled arguments. So, a name for argument 1, like name equals, department equals, extension equals, email equals. So it's like fields. And I'm going to stop there because I could go on forever, but that'll be in the content of the actual coding video coming up. It's very exciting, these name tuples, and it's a fundamental part of almost every project now for me. I use them for like a dozen different little uses, from database keys to function arguments, and it brings this thing called splat into the picture. Ooh, I'll stop there. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.